Hello everyone and welcome back to the Skilling Open. We are in the second match of the semifinals between Magnus Carlsen and Nepomniachtchi. Magnus was able to win the first match and now Nepo started the second match with a win. It was the game we've shown yesterday, and now this is the second game the two of them are playing. Magnus has the white pieces and it's quite a lovely game, so let's just dive straight into it. So Magnus with the white pieces goes e4. Sorry about that. We have c5 by Nepo, going for the Sicilian defense, and now Magnus, as he needs a win, so he has to try and mix something up. He needs a win to either just win the match outright. If he is able to draw the second match, he won the first one. That's a victory. He goes to the finals, well, he definitely doesn't want to allow Nepo to win the second match and then to go into blitz tiebreaks, because there just anything can happen. Even though Magnus is a World Blitz champion, you kind of want to settle things in the longer time format. So here c3, not going for the standard knight f3 d4 against the Sicilian. This is the Alapin variation. We have knight to f6, challenging the pawn right away, and now e5. We have knight d5 and now knight to f3. Knight to c6 by Nepo and bishop to c4. So this is very standard stuff. We have knight to b6 challenging the bishop and bishop back to b3. And here c4, challenging the bishop right away, is the most popular option. However, Nepo goes for d5. He offers Magnus to capture it, so he does. E captures and d6 en passant is played. Queen captures and now Magnus castles. We have bishop to e6, taking care of white's incredibly strong light square bishop, and Magnus trades it. We have captures, and now a4, preparing to kick away the knight with a5. We have queen back to d7, now preparing to move this pawn, and now a5. This is not a problem for black. Knight to d5, and now even a6. So this is an idea to weaken black's king side. If black captures, of course, then you're able to activate the rook. Then the knight will become a little bit weak, and Nepo, of course, doesn't allow this. He plays b6. b5 also was an option. He prefers b6, and only now d4. So Magnus waited some time to play this move, but this is all still considered theory. So captures and captures, challenging the knight on c6, and here we have e6. Strengthening the knight in the center, preparing to develop the dark square bishop and hopefully castle. And here this position has been reached before. Queen to a4 is a known move, knight to b5 is a known move, but the move Magnus plays, knight captures on c6, is a new move in the position. So as of move 15, we have a completely new game on our hands. And Nepo, of course, recaptures. And here, queen to g4. Now, this is the idea behind Carlsen's deviation from the known lines. Nepo will have some problems developing the bishop, as Magnus will be attacking the g7 pawn. So Nepo decides, all right, we're probably not going to castle this game. Let's go h5, challenging the queen, and maybe we can bring the rook into the game via rook to h6 at some point. So queen back to e2. Magnus just moves back, and now b5. Here we have knight to a3, bringing the knight into the game. Now you can challenge this b5 pawn, so Nepo immediately grabs it. Bishop captures on a3, rook captures on a3, and now f6. Strengthening the center, e5 can be played at some point. We have rook to b3, again going after that b5 pawn, and here knight to c7, defending it. We have rook to b4, gaining now more space for the rook. You can go rook to e4, you can go rook to d4, you can go rook to h4, so a lot of possibilities for this rook on the 4th rank. But it involves giving up the a6 pawn, but it's not a problem since Magnus will win it back. So queen captures on a6 by Nepo, and now comes queen, rook to h4, going after this pawn. And while you could defend it with something like g6, this is just weakening your position too much. Queen d3 is coming with an attack on this pawn, and there's just not much you can do. You can't go here because of queen check picks up the knight, and any other moves are just not enough. It's just a terrible position for black. So after rook h4, we have king to f7, Nepo gives back the pawn, and rook captures on h5. Now we have knight to d5, brings the knight into the game, and rook to e1, putting pressure on e6. so you have to be careful not to move your queen away from the defense of this pawn. And queen to c6 by Nepo. If Magnus is not careful, something like knight f4 attacking the queen, the rook, and threatening checkmate could happen on the board. So Magnus there's no problem. This is not a threat yet. He just goes h4. For the moment, the bishop guards the f4 square, so it's not a problem. We have a5. Nepo now starts expanding on the queen side. And here Magnus trades. Rook captures on h8, rook captures, and now even h5. Nepo continues pushing on the queen side. We have a4, and now bishop to d2 by Magnus. Not a lot of active possibilities for Magnus, as like I said, he really needs a win to get back into the match. He does have the white pieces, and so far Nepo didn't give him any chances. He's playing very solid, and it's not all that easy to make a breakthrough here. So knight to e7 by Nepo, shifting the knight over to f5, and here Magnus goes for something that is very, very interesting. As like I said, you don't have a lot of options here to create some chances in the position, but Magnus finds one. He pushes h6. He gives up this pawn temporarily and allows Nepo to capture it. So you cannot capture with the rook because the bishop guards it, but you can capture with the pawn. This is what Nepo does, and Magnus immediately goes in with the queen. Queen h5 check, knight to g6 blocking. You could also go king to g7 to defend the pawn, but then you allow ideas like rook e3, rook g3, and even if black can defend against these threats, maybe it's a bit too much to allow. So here we have knight to g6 instead. Nepo says, okay, you're free to capture this pawn, but your bishop will not be able to move for quite some time. So bishop captures, now the bishop cannot move. And here comes queen to d6 by Nepo. Here Nepo missed a brilliant opportunity to take the game straight into the endgame with queen d5, because now you have to trade queens. You have to play queen captures or go to an incredibly passive square like queen to h2. Because, well, if you play something like queen to h3, then knight f4 just wins the game on the spot, because you either lose the bishop, the queen is under attack, and also there's the threat of checkmate, so you cannot defend against all of these threats. So Nepo missed queen to d5, and Magnus would have to trade queens here and just go into an endgame where Nepo would have the upper hand. So he played queen to d6 instead, but now he just gives Magnus a few free moves. Rook to d1, attacking the queen. Queen to c6, and now also Nepo misses an opportunity to play rook captures on h6. Immediately trade down into an endgame, because here white's only good move is queen captures on g6. We would see a recapture, and then rook captures on d6 would go into a rook and pawn endgame with 4 pawns on each side. Nepo doesn't go for that either. He goes queen to c6 instead, and now comes rook to d4. There's always this possibility of queen captures here, followed by knight f4 check and picking up the queen, but as long as this knight is pinned, that's not happening. So here, rook d4, Magnus grabs hold of the fourth rank. Also ideas like rook to g4 might be possible. So here, f5, Nepo prevents that, but now rook to d3. Now the rook can go well, pretty much anywhere. And the queen has to be careful. If you lose control of d7, then the rook is just incredibly strong here. So rook g8, and now bishop back to g5. We have rook back to h8 by Nepo, challenging the queen, but Magnus doesn't repeat. Magnus goes back, queen to e2. And now comes queen to c7, threatening queen h2 check, followed by queen to h1 checkmate, and Magnus needs to do something about it. Problem is, if you weaken your king side with g3, then you get another checkmate threat, and then you have to weaken your position further. Not something Magnus wants to do. So instead, Magnus makes the decision to play rook h3. He decides to trade off a pair of rooks and then play queen and bishop against queen and knight. So rook captures, g captures, and now queen to e5. Nepo offers a queen trade, and Magnus, of course, declines this. Queen back to d1, and now comes knight to f8. So it's an incredibly difficult position to win for white, but Magnus, of course, has to try. We have h4. He does have a pass pawn, so he might as well push it. And now king to g6, preventing any pushes of the h-pawn, because then just king captures bishop. So queen to d8, threatening to pick up the knight here, and now comes queen to g7. A proper reply here would have been king to f7, but it's hard to follow everything, especially in a rapid game. So here Nepo played queen to g7, but now the position is winning for Magnus, unfortunately for Nepo. So feel free to pause the video here and win the game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that the e8 square is not covered. That's why we said queen to f7 was king to f7 was much better. So for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, queen to e8 check, and this is what Magnus played. So he said, all right, I might not be able to checkmate your king, but I will gobble up all of your pawns on the queen side. So king h7, and now queen captures on b5, and now you have a problem. Magnus will win this pawn, and there's not much you can do about it. You could play queen to d7 to try and defend it like this, and then maybe try and play this endgame being a pawn down. But now Magnus doesn't even have to trade, so he can just he has two passed pawns, and he can even keep the queens on the board. So here, knight to g6 by Nepo, going after this pawn, because you will not be able to capture with the bishop, but Magnus just captures on a4, now defends this pawn with the queen, and now he has three passed pawns, and this is just overwhelming for Nepo. So all of a sudden, he was holding Magnus to a draw, winning the match, and now he's going to have to struggle to get a draw here. Knight to e5 by Nepo, trying to get this knight f3 check in, but Magnus immediately stops it, queen f4. We have queen to h8, preparing to stop those pawns on the queen side, and Magnus, of course, starts pushing them. b4. We have king g6, and now queen to e3. The knight is constantly threatened, so the queen has to be very careful where she moves. King f7, and now b5. Magnus just continues pushing his passed pawns. Queen to b8, still defending this knight, and now, of course, bishop f4, threatening to pick up the knight, and the knight cannot move as the queen is on b8. So queen g8 check, only good move, well, relatively good, as there are no good moves in this position. King to f1, and now knight to g4. Attacks the queen, but queen a7 check, queen a7 check, king to g6, and now queen to e7, going for queen to g5 check. If the queens get traded off, then it's just game over. White just pushes these pawns to victory. So Nepo goes knight to f6, and now every move is winning in this position. Not every move, obviously, you cannot play queen captures on f6, but pretty much every good move is winning. So feel free to pause the video for the last time and find the absolute best winning move, which ends the game immediately, again, while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on pushing that h-pawn, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, yes, it is h5. And it was in this position on move 53 that Nepomniachtchi resigned the game, and Magnus equalized the match. So just to show you what happens here, if you capture the pawn, king captures on h5, and you don't really have any other options, the bishop and queen cover all of the squares. So you either capture with the king, and then you get queen captures on f6, now you're just down a piece, completely winning for white. And if you capture with the knight, not much better, because queen g5 check again picks up the knight. King f7, queen captures with check, and now it's dead lost for black. So yeah, after this h5 move, Nepo resigned, and a great comeback in the match for Magnus Carlsen. And then game 3 and game 4 also ended in a draw, and with Magnus winning the first match and drawing the second one, it's Magnus Carlsen who will go to the finals of the Skilling Open. And in the other matchup, Hikaru versus Wesley So, Wesley So won the first match, and in the second match, all 4 games ended in a draw, but they were incredibly fighting games. Hikaru was dead lost in pretty much all of them, I think. Not all of them, but I'm pretty sure he was dead lost in the first and the second one, but he was able to miraculously pull off a draw, and I thought, wow, now he's going to win it. But then Wesley was able to draw all the other games, and it's Wesley who wins that match. So we will have Magnus Carlsen versus Wesley So in the finals of the Skilling Open, which means clash of 2 world champions, as Magnus is the reigning world champion in every time format, whereas Wesley is the world champion, unofficial world champion in, or was it the first official world? I think it was the first official random. Well, either way, Wesley So is the world champion in the Chess 960 or the official random world chess champion. So it's gonna be wild. So yeah, that's the game and the coverage so far. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I would like to thank Jason Barr, Bike Communications LLC, Dr. Marmota, Divya Swarup, Chaitanya Kwar, and Andrew Creel for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing with the finals of the Skilling Open, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Sunday.